Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode in our GPS series. Last time we talked about Formula 2 and we were just waiting for testing to start. Well, the last one weekend, I think, was probably the fastest and most intense testing phase that Formula 1 has seen in perhaps, I don't know, the past few decades. I need to look up my history, but it was definitely a tight schedule for all the teams.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I mean, considering that we just have 3 days of testing, a lot of teams had to have chucked in a lot of time and a lot of effort to ensure that they have a small or constructed package. And not just that, they have to involve all their testing programs and to acclimatize to a particular a weather program which they haven't seen in the past, I'd say 5 to 6 years. So yeah, a lot's been happening in the past 3 days. Plus, they don't have an extra 3 days to talk about car performance or even quantifying data as well.
Yeah, I mean, usually we see testing like happening in two phases. They go to Catalonia, but they have like one test and then wait for a couple of weeks and have a second test of 3 days. And then after that, they go back to the factories, prepare for a month or like a couple of weeks. So testing happens about 1.5 months before the season starts. This test was unique because there was you like you said, there was strange weather, that dust storm that played into, I think, probably the end of day two, that caused way too many spinalas on the track, and not by the man who unfortunately got the title of being Spinala King. But I think one thing that usually happens every year is Mercedes not really going very fast in tests. And I don't know, we saw that happen this year. Are they sandbagging?
You know what a nice way to bring up the topic of sand. Like, I mean, you go to Bahrain, there was sand in the air, and you most definitely know that sand in the cars as well. But I think a very clear benchmark which a lot of teams have kept during testing has not been met even during the first or the second races of the season. And coming to your question of were Mercedes sandbagging, I think in all certainty yes they were. But I think for them sandbagging was not their biggest problem. They have not set a lot of time on their new car. So I don't know if they can actually quantify the data which they have got from their new floor designs. Because I think Mercedes is the one team that have basically clocked the least number of laps in total, which I think is about 304 or 302. So considering that they've had a lot of reliability issues with their gearbox, which limited Bottas's running on day one, and the number of spins which Lewis had on day two and at the end of day three also reduce the kind of data they would get on, let's say, race simulation runs or even quali runs. So I think sandbagging is not their problem. I think it is a lack of data which they can actually use to quantify future upgrades or just basic performance with respect to what they had in Bahrain last year. They have a
Yeah,
lot more woes than that.
I mean, irrespective of whether they're actually purposely going slow or not, I mean, the number of spins that we saw from Lewis and Bottas, by the way, and Valtteri, surprisingly a large number of spins compared to what they would usually have on track. I mean, yeah, it is quite strange to see that. Generally in testing, yes, cars do spin. Every time you take a new car on track with limited testing time, you have to find the limits. And not to mention, of course, the sand was on track, but it still, kind of got the gears running and turning. And there is some hope that maybe this season is going to be a lot more tight than what we've seen in the past. Who knows? Maybe this last year of this major uh, rule formula, combo that we've been following since 2014, it's not going to be Mercedes's run. We'll just have to wait and see. Apart from just Mercedes, I think another standout was Red Bull, what they were able to pull off with mainly with Verstappen's car. But it was good to see Perez also got a few good runs into these 3 days of testing. I don't know. Do you really think that this 5.5 second difference between Red Bull and Mercedes is going to stretch into the season?
Uh, let's be real. I don't think that 5.5 second gap, which was shown during testing by Red Bull, is an adequate representation of the pace of the entire grid. I think what Red Bull's program was during the first 3 days of testing was something completely different to what Mercedes, McLaren, or Ferrari were running at any given point in time. But what you can conclude from this argument is saying that Red Bull are on par with what they tested back in Bahrain a few months ago for during practice. So I think there is a lot of power which is left to be unleashed by the Red Bulls, and I think they're just keeping it for the rest of the season. But we have seen, by the way, a lot of technical changes have been done to the Red Bull, that you have new bits of aero which has been put onto the car. So I think a lot of the running which they're doing is based to get on trying to understand how the new floor has impacted the performance of the car. Plus, they also have a new rear suspension. So a lot of work is basically done, have been done on that, so that they can ensure that it's going to be as reliable as the RB15 or the RB16 rather. And also considering the fact that they also have to work on their engine for the next few years, you can't absolutely say that that 5.5 seconds is going to be going bigger. But I'm sure that they are going to be in a place where they are going to give Mercedes a challenge, at least in the beginning of the season, because I'm also sure that a lot of other teams might have reliability issues, considering we've just had 3 days of testing. We may
Yeah.
not have an absolute answer to it, but I'm sure that the gap has reduced in a particular way to at least the teams using Mercedes engine. Now, also considering that we have we have McLaren on board with the Mercedes engine.
Yeah. Speaking of McLaren and also Aston, who were Racing Point, who were already using Mercedes engines. What's interesting to see is actually Mercedes, McLaren, and Aston Martin all have quite similar lap times, all about the same 0.5 to 0.6 seconds off of Red Bull pace. So one could, logically, you could derive that perhaps the Mercedes engine isn't up to par. But when you actually look at what's happened in these tests, I don't think any of these three teams were pushing their cars to the limits. You see an onboard camera of Vettel or Stroll running their cars. Aston, they weren't pushing it to the limits, and we already know that Aston didn't really have the most detailed and high performance test. And I think probably the team with the least number of high performance laps in the whole grid together. McLaren, once again, I don't think they're really pushing their car to their limits. So if these times are anything to go by, it could really be anyone's game. Of course, Mercedes would perhaps be leading the Merc engine powered cars, that pack of cars. But I think it's going to be a tight fight between McLaren and Aston. And potentially, if you look at other cars down the grid, Alpine and AlphaTauri could get in the mix for podium spots this year.
Oh, speaking about Alpine, you know what? Like, I think this very simple definition of Fernando Alonso I have. Like, you put Fernando Alonso into a car, you take the performance of that car and shave it by zero point 0.5 of a second, because that's what Alonso can do. So I'm not sure about what Ocon's done, but Ocon's put some solid laps in that car. He has shown that the Alpine's new A521 is pretty much on par with the Renault which was running in 2020. But I think given Alonso's experience, he is going to be very good addition to Alpine's program to actually contest for battling in the middle of the pack. And you've seen with the way Alonso has been racing in any car, whether it is through through his LMP program in Le Mans, or whether he has been doing it through IndyCar or even in Formula One. He has basically extracted more than what the car can give him and more than what the team can give him. So I think in addition, like Fernando Alonso is going to give Alpine something to contest for. And also Yuki Tsunoda's subliminal performance during testing has also shown that Alpha Tauri are a very stable team. They have the likes of Pierre Gasly, who has set literally the most laps of any person in testing right now, and so you have a young you have a young you have a young kid, a 20-year-old who literally has a lot of time on the 2018 machinery, on the 2019 machinery, on the 2020 machinery, and now the 2021 machinery. So
Yep.
all in all, when you look at the way the mid pack is holding up, Alpha Tauri are in a good place to actually move on from where they did last year, because I think right now the car looks a lot more stable than what it was last year. It's a lot more planted, it's a lot more balanced. And I think they're very confident drivers as well. So they don't really have to worry about I hope this doesn't age like milk. So I hope they don't focus on chucking drivers out of the team, but focusing more on implementing how they can perform based on the kind of car they have, because right now they have to also focus on a Honda engine, which they themselves have to work on.
For sure. Let's hope this goes positively because looking at Sonora's onboard camera, I mean, I don't know, that's perhaps the only real reference we all have as fans who are just watching the sport and reading and seeing what's up in the motorsport world. Just looking at those onboard cameras, you can already see how much Sonoda was pushing in I guess one of his fastest laps in their whole testing phase. I'm really excited to see what he does this year. I have a feeling he's perhaps going to give Gasly a run for his money. Maybe not in the first few races because he still has to get acclimatized with the car, with the general pace of Formula One. But I mean, definitely 2-3 races into the season, this is definitely going to play uh, potentially into Yuki Tsunoda's favor if he can maintain the same level of consistency that he does have right now. Speaking of speaking of midfield, we did think another team would perhaps climb their way up midfield. That is Ferrari, of course. Ferrari were supposed to have come up with perhaps a better formula for their engine, and people have told that Ferrari's engine is going to be faster this year. But you see, all three Ferrari-powered teams in the not really the bottom three. If you remove Williams from this grid, then yes, they are in the bottom three of the pack. Definitely not midfield right now, and Ferrari is not at the is perhaps getting the worst end of that stick. What do you think is going to happen to Ferrari? I don't think these times are indicative of what they're going to do this season.
Yeah, I think that's very rightly said, Saidat. They are not indicative of what any of the Ferrari power teams can do, because you've seen by the likes of all three different teams which are running the Ferrari powered cars, all three of them have opted to go for different sorts of upgrades compared to each other. Like you have seen Ferrari's new upgrades, which are literally the most radical upgrades you've seen on any car, because they have decided to change literally everything they want in their car, starting from their engine, starting from their rear packaging, starting from the front end. They've changed their nose and the front wing, and they've changed the floorboards as well. So you've seen a car which basically has literally no amount of track tested data coming onto track. But I think their main priority right now is making sure they have lap times and track time or data on their new engine. So you can see by the likes of all three Ferrari teams which are running, they have clocked in at least over 700 or 850 laps on the current new engine which they're running. So I think based on what Ferrari has been doing, I think it is indicative of the fact that they need to get data from their new engine. And I think even if you look at the way Alpha has been running, Alpha's main upgrades have been done to the front end of their car. They have a new front wing, they have a new nose, and getting data on that also was quite important to them. Also considering the fact that they think that the new Ferrari engine is a lot more overpowered than what we have seen in the past few days of testing. Frederick Vassar has said that the dyno tests have been successful, and they have also shown decent results in his words. I'm just thinking that maybe they're not going to be challenging for, let's say, race wins in 2021, but I think they're in a place where they can contest for good points. And I don't think that Alfa, Alfa Romeo is going to be in like the bottom pack, but they will be somewhere in the middle for a few races during the season. I also, but coming to Haas, I mean, they've given up. Like it's no big news to them. The only thing they have changed in their car is the packaging of their front suspension. I think that's pretty much the only upgrade they have taken on after the fact that they're getting a new Ferrari engine.
I think it's just the fact that they don't want to spend any more of their time or their money, at least this year, working on developing the current car because the whole formula is changing next year. But yeah, in terms of whatever car data these three teams have with their new Ferrari engine, these 3 days have definitely not been enough. And we could already see that we're not really sure of the details of what the teams are doing, what data they actually have. But at least from looking at the timing sheets, these three teams were definitely struggling for grip. What is surprising and very pleasant and good to see is that Alfa Romeo have actually slightly picked up their performance with respect to last year. This is again just speculation. This is only if these testing times mean anything for the rest of the season. But my point is seeing Sauber climb their way back up from a disastrous mid 2010s. In that decade, I think in the 2013-14 range is where their performance started dipping. And now for Alfa Romeo to slowly claw their way back up the midfield pack will be very refreshing and a very good sight for the whole fan base, given the rich history of that team. But speaking of teams with rich history, yeah, I think Ferrari fans really want something to happen this year. And yeah, if the Ferrari engine really is as fast as they say, Ferrari could be another contender for freak podiums this year. But at this point, it's perhaps a long shot, seeing that they're 1.2 seconds off the pace from the fastest lap on the last day of testing.
Yeah, I mean, sure. I think it's very rightly said that Ferrari fans are expecting a lot of things from the team, and I think a lot of people are expecting the team to perform since 2008 or 2009. So I think it's a wait that has gone a little too long. But I think Ferrari understands that as a team better than we do as individuals who just support it from the from the from the comfort of our houses. But all in all, I think, as you said, this is the end of a formula, and a lot of teams are actually putting on their technology and their R&D into finding out what's better for 2022. And I think that is the most sustainable way of looking at things, because Formula One also is trying to look into way how it can be a carbon neutral sport by, I don't know, by the end of 2030 or 2035. I don't know if that's easily
Yeah.
achievable, but I guess it is the forefront of technology for automobiles in the world. So I get I get the sentiment, and I get where things are going. So I guess 2021 is just going to be as exciting as any season could be. Just waiting forward to see how things happen in 10 days time in Bahrain.
Yeah, I think given that it was such a limited, it was just 3 days of testing. Nobody could really put out proper race simulations. I know some teams really did. I think Gasly, if I'm not mistaken, is the driver that did the most number of laps in the whole test, somewhere around 220 laps almost just on his own over 3 days, compared to Vettel, who only did about 110 or so. But yeah, I mean, all in all, yeah, in terms of tire performance for, of course, we talked about how the aero regulations have changed just to suit the tires, which haven't gone through a big change from last year. But tire compounds still have changed a little bit this year. They really have done a few tweaks to the tire compounds just to sustain running for these cars for another year on this formula. Regarding what's going to happen to those tires and how they're going to affect the car's performance, I don't know how much we can take from testing. I think we can only really say what's going to happen when we see a full race happen next week at Bahrain.
Yeah, completely agree. And also, it depends on the kind of tires that are given to the teams for a particular race. So you always have three different sets of tire compounds which are given to a team prior to a race. And I think Pirelli and Mario Isola are very keen on making sure that we don't have another Silverstone 2020 that happens again, because that's just crazy. And no team ever
Yeah,
wants to be in a situation where they just because they just don't know what's happening to the tires. They're just blowing up. That just brings them to a Formula 2 grid where teams are like, we tried our best, but the tires just did this to us. So I guess we
yeah.
can just wait and watch, as you say.
Let's hope it's not as extreme. Good part is, of course, Bahrain is run at night. It's not even a dusk race. It's a proper night race. Um, so temperatures will be quite cool. It's in the middle of a desert, so yeah, temperatures are definitely not going to be freezing cold, but they're going to be uh, relatively cooler than other tracks. And Bahrain, as you see, is also going to be running the softer compounds of that Pirelli offers. So. Uh, yeah, it will be a decent benchmark, but like we've said, Bahrain is not really the best benchmark for overall performance. That's going to happen a few races down the line. Portimao might be our first reference to what these cars can do on track. But on that note, yeah, I hope this has given you a good refresher of what's happened in testing over the past few days. There's very limited data at the moment, and we can only really hope that things come to light by the time cars hit the track full fledged next week. So on that note, I'm done with what I have to say. Taco, any other last words to conclude testing?
Ciao, ragazzi.
All right, ciao ragazzi.